The Hill's reporters are covering every angle of the convention and getting you news and analysis that you can rely on. We're going to be action-packed on our website at thehill.com with all of it. What should you be thinking about as you get ready to experience a virtual Democratic convention? To talk about the Democratic voters and the newly minted Democratic ticket, I'm joined by Julia Manchester, the Hill's political reporter. Julia, great to see you. So you've just heard a few, snapshots of how Democrats. And my last question to Neera and Maria was really in the social media phase, because, to a certain degree, that's one of the vital tools that are going to be used by the Democrats. Perhaps, maybe the Republicans will do the same, but the Republicans still seem to be wanting to have rallies and in-person things. How do you think, do you buy what Neera Tanden and Maria shared, that the Democrats will be able to navigate the muck?
I think it's quite possible, Steve. Right now, the Democrats have a big obstacle ahead of them. They are having this all virtual convention. And with that comes the risk of maybe some convention fatigue, some viewer fatigue, watching these speeches and such without a live audience, without the balloons. We all have seen that famous gif of Hillary Clinton looking at the balloons after she accepted the Democratic nomination just 4 years ago. But now it'll just be virtual, just these speeches. So Democrats really will have to get creative to try to appeal more voters and to keep them engaged. And we know that they've brought in a number of musical guests, a number of celebrities to try to make it a bit more interesting for viewers, more engaging. But I think this really does at the same time go along with the Democratic strategy right now and with the Biden strategy. And that is setting an example amid the coronavirus pandemic. Last week, when Vice President Biden and Senator Kamala Harris walked out for the first time in public, as a presidential ticket, they were both wearing masks. They were in a small gymnasium. Only a few of their staff and some socially distanced reporters were there. That would not normally be the case in another election year, when you'd see a big rally introducing the running mate picks. So I think right now, the Biden campaign is definitely trying to set an example and say, look, this is what we have to do right now in order to stop the spread of coronavirus.
Let me ask you, you just talked about Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and the ticket and the masks. Is there a sense in the party, is there an understanding that's felt about what a historic ticket this is? Or is that sort of being lost on folks?
There's no doubt an understanding in the party of what historic ticket this really is. And Steve, I think we have to step back and look at the, the nationwide climate, the global climate. Really, we are seeing, the deaths of a number of, too many unarmed Black individuals, including Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, really launched the latest civil rights movement. And I think you saw Joe Biden, who had already committed to picking a female running mate. He was definitely forced to maybe look into committing to an African-American woman, which is symbolic in itself, because African-American women in particular have been the backbone of the Democratic Party for decades now. So this really is a reflection, I think, of where we are as a country right now, where Vice President Biden wants to be, in the future as a country, and really just trying to appeal to a voting bloc and to almost try to, recognize that voting bloc and to show thankfulness and gratitude to that voting bloc and try to rev them up ahead of November.
Julia, you have been a student for many years of party platforms. And oftentimes party platforms are there to, unite rather than divide. But how is this party platform shaping up, and how does it compare to others you've looked at, particularly the last 2016?
Right. I would say this party platform in particular definitely gives a bit more concessions to progressives in the party and is definitely lending a hand to that leftward flank of the party. You saw progressive figures like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez teaming up with former Secretary of State John Kerry, a longtime figure of the Democratic establishment, to help craft the party's climate platform. So we know that progressives have very much been involved in the crafting of this platform, but they're walking a narrow line at the same time because they want to unite the Democratic Party as a whole, not just the progressives who have really gained a lot of traction in terms of popularity. But Steve, I think, the platform is just one symbol of how this unifying message is really being portrayed in the election. I think if you just look at the amount of speakers and who the speakers are, that really shows this theme of unifying that you're seeing in this convention. Tonight, you have former First Lady Michelle Obama, obviously a very major figure in the Democratic establishment, a very popular figure in the party. Then you have Progressive Senator Bernie Sanders, really much the leader of the progressive movement in the Democratic Party. And then you even have former Republican Governor John Kasich, someone who's been very much associated with the Never Trump movement. And I think this is definitely the Democrats and Biden's way of saying, look, we need to gather our troops from a number of different parts of the ideological spectrum in order to compete against Donald Trump in November.
Julia, had you ever imagined a month ago that the U.S. Postal Service would be the hottest above-the-fold topic in American politics? I'd love to get your take on it and whether or not the fight over Postal Service and mail-in ballots is going to remain the top of the fold for a while.
It's interesting, Steve. We've seen this fight over mail-in ballots brewing over the past couple of months amid the coronavirus pandemic. I spent the last 5 months in Florida reporting on the coronavirus and how it intersected in politics in that state. And really what I saw was the beginning of this battle over mail-in voting, because in Florida, for example, 20% of the state is made up of senior citizens. So that essentially means that the majority of those voters in this very critical swing state are going to want to vote by mail. So that definitely impacts.
Of course, not to interrupt, but the president as well. The president as well.
The president as well, and so his press secretary as well, or she has in the past, and a number of other administration officials. But, Florida aside, it's interesting to look at who mail-in voting benefits and who it doesn't benefit. I think senior citizens, the conventional wisdom for a while has been that they've tended to vote Republican. However, this practice also benefits members of more lower income communities where, for example, members of those communities may not have the luxury of taking a day off or part of a day off from work to go to a ballot box, or they may not have the luxury of getting transportation to that ballot box. So mail-in voting very much works in their favor and works in the Democratic favor. So I think the timing of all of this is very, very interesting that President Trump brings this up 3 months before an election where he's trailing in a number of not only nationwide, but state level polls. That's very interesting timing, I would say the least.
Just finally, I want to tell our audience that there's nobody better than my colleague Julia Manchester at working her way into the nooks and crannies of political parties, and cocktail parties, and finding out when you don't have all that to kind of and you're online. What are the secret skills that you've developed to kind of find your way in to the juicy stories in an online convention?
It's definitely been an adjustment, I would say, and something that a number of political reporters, including myself, maybe struggled with at first. But one thing I've realized is that reporters aren't the only ones going through this. The people that you meet at those parties or at those in-person gatherings aren't at those gatherings anymore as well. So your comms people, your, advisors, strategists and such, they're looking to connect with reporters as well. So I think almost, the two sides of how all of this works in Washington and the political world have really come together online. So I've actually been connected with a number of people in the lead up to this convention, and also in a number of other races happening as well online, because they're essentially looking to reach out to reporters as well. And I've met a number of new contacts. So at first it was definitely a bit of a struggle, but there was definitely a silver lining in that we're all in the same boat navigating these tough waters together.
So we're going to be talking all week, right?
I'm around.
Okay, we're going to talk all week. Tonight, I know Michelle Obama, you're looking forward to hearing from her. So who are you most excited about in second slot?
In second slot, I would say New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo has become a celebrity of sorts, really, among Gen Z voters and millennial voters, two groups that Democrats really need to rally to get out the vote in November. You open up Twitter or TikTok or Instagram, and you see a number of Andrew Cuomo memes because he became so popular at those daily coronavirus press briefings that he was giving. So, and especially at a time when the Biden campaign and the Democrats are trying to make the coronavirus response such a big part of their platform, I think Cuomo's speech is going to be very, very important in a way to kind of draw a comparison to how he handled the situation in New York, which has seen cases go drastically down recently, compared to President Trump, who's handled it and how he's handled it nationwide.
Well, Julia Manchester, political reporter of The Hill, my awesome colleague, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you later this week.
Thank you, Steve.